There you go. That was the first song I remember, Little Red Monkey, Monkey. But in truth, you could go with another one, was at boarding school.
Most people know of the legendary band Fleetwood Mac and that Mick Fleetwood has always been the heart of the band. But do they know the truth behind his struggles and the chaos that the band members lived through? Their recent posts and a soon-to-be-released documentary have shown that their story is far from over, and their secrets are about to be exposed. The 2026 Mystery and the Ghost of the Past, Mick Fleetwood, the legendary British drummer from one of the biggest bands in the world. He formed the band Fleetwood Mac with bassist John McVie and guitarist Peter Green in London in 1967. The band went on to become one of the most successful musical acts in history. Their music is even more popular now than it was in the 1970s peak. Despite that Mick keeps a low profile, instead of touring the globe, he has been focusing on his life in Hawaii, a place that has become his sanctuary. After the devastating Lahaina fires in 2023 destroyed his restaurant, Fleetwood's on Front Street, he frequently uses his social media to raise awareness and share updates on the island's recovery and his local charity work. But recently, he uploaded a video on Instagram that got a lot of people speculating what it could mean. The video showed him shirtless out in the sun somewhere in his home in Maui, Hawaii. He was posed next to a black top hat perched on a stand. He then said, "Thinking about a lovely lady who sang in a band, very special lady," while giving a thumbs up and smiling. He proceeded to add the caption, "A very special lady," with a dove emoji. This post caused a lot of confusion. The black top hat is a signature accessory famously worn by Stevie Nicks. The dove emoji he used is also closely associated with her and the song Edge of 17. But the phrasing, "my special lady," is often used by Mick to address Christine McVie in the years following her passing. Now everyone's wondering if he was referring to. After Christine's passing in 2022, the members of the group were overcome by grief. They all felt there was no reason to continue as a group without her. Stevie had been very firm in her public statements, often telling interviewers that you simply cannot replace her. For a long time, everyone thought it was over for the group. Mick had always been the one holding the group together, even when the rest of the band were ready to quit. When he posted that video, people across social media started wondering if all those years of silence and that distance between Stevie and Lindsay might finally be breaking down. Was Mick working on a solo project, or was this the first sign pointing toward a 2026 reunion? What are the chances that the video wasn't just a random post? With the massive Apple documentary right around the corner, directed by Frank Marshall, the timing is almost too perfect to be a coincidence. We know that all the surviving members have sat down for new interviews, telling their side of the story. It shows that even at 78, Mick still knows how to surprise us and still has stories left to share. Despite all the past affairs, breakups, and drama, it feels like he's ready to focus on finding common ground and moving forward. There is a reason why he wants to bring the band back together, and it has something to do with the huge shadow that has followed him for years. Before he could even think about a reunion, he had to endure a downfall so severe it almost cost him his career, his home, and his very sense of self. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, Mick wasn't just the drummer for the biggest band in the world, he was the band's manager. Fleetwood Mac was constantly releasing hits and selling out stadiums, bringing in a lot of money. Mick was living a lavish lifestyle. It was a world made of private jets, endless parties, and a lot of expenses that eventually reached a breaking point. He famously earned the nickname the King of Toot because of his massive appetite for illegal substances, a habit that was just as bad for his health as it was his bank account. He has been very open about his experience. Some publications claimed he burned through an estimated $60 million during the band's peak years, while Mick himself gave an estimate of $8 million, which is still an unbelievable figure. Mick suffered physically and mentally during that period. His constant use had effects on him, one of the major reasons being that he can't remember 2 full years of his life following the success of Rumors. He was a man who had everything the world could offer, yet he was spiraling toward a financial cliff. He was losing more money than he was making, and this wasn't just about his addiction. Mick Fleetwood also made poor investments plans. He bought too much real estate on impulse, including a $2.2 million home in Malibu and a $1.8 million farm in Australia that he barely used. He later joked that he bought the farm as a whimsical pipe dream to start a new life, only to realize he couldn't actually live there because it was infested with toxic spiders. Mick was also a cheerful giver who bought expensive gifts for a large entourage of friends who lived off his wealth. What makes this story even more incredible is that, while Mick was losing his own fortune, he was still the guy in charge of the band's business. He was the manager and the leader, the one who had to make sure the tours were booked and the bills were paid. On one hand, he was trying to keep the Fleetwood Mac running smoothly. On the other hand, his personal finances were a total wreck. By 1984, just 7 years after rumors became a global phenomenon, the man who had helped sell millions of records eventually filed for bankruptcy. He listed over $3.7 million in debt, which was significantly more than any assets he had left. He had to sell off his car collection and even some of his gold records just to get by. Most people would have vanished after a hit like that, but Mick was resilient. He eventually quit illegal substances in 1991 and has spent the last 35 years sober. At 78, he looks back at those stories with a mix of humor and regret, using them as a warning to others in the lead-up to the 2026 Apple documentary. That period changed him deeply. It showed him that fame and money don't last, but the music and the people you make it with are what actually stays. He had to face the consequences in a way that was both painful and very public. However, the financial ruin was only one part of the struggle he was dealing with during those wild years. While his bank account was emptying out, his personal life was becoming even more complicated. The pressure of the money problems only added fuel to the fires that were already burning inside the band. Asides losing money, Mick's secret affairs were about to turn the studio environment into a war zone instead of a workspace. During those years, money problems were a major issue, but it was the emotional damage that left the deepest scars. While Mick was fighting to stay afloat financially, he was also caught in a complicated web of relationships that could have torn any other group apart. The most famous secret of all was the 2-year affair between Mick and Stevie Nicks. It started in 1977 during the middle of the Rumours tour while they were all trapped on the same tour bus in Australia. They kept it hidden from everyone for a long time, especially Lindsey Buckingham. Stevie later admitted that if that relationship had gone public back then, it likely would have been the end of the band right then and there. They were essentially playing with fire in a room full of gasoline, and for a while, they somehow managed to keep the spark contained. However, things started going south when the affair ended. Just as things cooled off with Stevie, Mick fell in love with her very best friend, a model named Sarah Ricoeur. She eventually became Mick's next wife. To make matters even more complicated, Sarah was the person sitting by Stevie's side when Stevie wrote the legendary song that bears her name. She was devastated and felt betrayed. She could handle the end of a rocky romance with Mick, but losing her best friend to the man she had just loved was too much to handle. The tension got so bad during the recording of the Tusk album that the rest of the band actually had to step in. They made the tough decision to ban Sarah from the studio just to keep the peace and make sure Stevie could actually finish her vocals without having a breakdown. No one was speaking to each other, and Stevie refused to even look at Mick while they were working. Mick often describes this era as a dark wing over the band. They were living in a world of luxury and success, but they were also trapped in a cycle of hurt that they could not escape. Mick was in the middle of it all, trying to play the role of the peacemaker while he was often the one causing the most trouble. The shadow of that betrayal followed him and Stevie for decades, becoming the main reason they don't talk much today. As we look at Mick in 2026, it's clear that his recent calls for healing are about finally cleaning up the mess he helped create so long ago. He knows that the clocks are ticking and that the chance to make things right will not last forever. He has spent over 30 years sober now, looking back at those wild nights with a perspective that only comes with age. He wants Stevie and Lindsey to find the kind of peace he found on the shores of Hawaii. He wants to prove that even a story as chaotic as theirs can have a graceful ending where everyone walks away as friends. This personal betrayal created a brick wall between the band's leads that would stand for nearly 50 years until the 2018 coup changed everything. The coup, the reconciliation, and the Great Thaw. While the 90s-70s scandals feel like ancient history to some, the biggest explosion in the band's story actually happened much more recently. In 2018, Fleetwood Mac was gearing up for what fans thought would be a successful world tour. But instead, it turned into a shocking corporate takeover that left everyone stunned. It all started at a MusiCares benefit concert where the band was being honored. Apparently, something about the way Lindsey Buckingham acted during Stevie Nicks' speech or the music they played that night was the final straw. Within days, the word got out that Stevie had issued an ultimatum to the rest of the group. She essentially told Mick and the others that it was either her or Lindsey. She was not going to share a stage with him ever again, and the band had to choose. Mick Fleetwood found himself back in a position he had played many times before, but this time was different. He had to be the one to pick up the phone and tell his longtime partner and musical architect that he was out. Being the executioner in that moment was a harsh role. Lindsey, the one who had driven their sounds to the top of the charts, was suddenly being replaced by other musicians for the tour. The shock of his firing didn't stay behind closed doors. Lindsey wasn't the kind to take things like this quietly. He felt betrayed by his old friends and ended up filing a lawsuit for millions of dollars, claiming breach of oral contract. It was a messy public legal battle that made it look like the famous five would never speak again. The fallout from the 2018 firing cast a long shadow over the band's legacy. In the years that followed, the members exchanged pointed remarks in the media. Stevie talked about needing to protect her own happiness. Lindsey spoke out about the band's soul being compromised, and even Mick seemed to accept that the rift was permanent. He told reporters that they had reached a point of no return. It felt like the drama that started in the 70s had finally ended in a courtroom instead of a concert hall. Fans everywhere mourned the idea that they would never see that classic lineup together again. It was a period of silence that lasted through the global lockdowns and the personal tragedies that followed. By the time 2022 rolled around and Christine McVie passed away, the odds of a reconciliation seemed to drop to zero. Stevie was very clear that without Christine, there was no reason to even try. The world moved on, assuming the members would live out their lives in separate corners of the world, never acknowledging the decades of magic they made together. Mick remained the only one trying to keep the memory alive from his home in Maui, but even his optimism seemed to be fading. He was a man who had lost his band, his best friend in Christine, and his connection to the guy who helped him build the empire. For years, it felt like the classic lineup was gone for good, but in 2025, something unexpected happened behind closed studio doors, something that no one saw coming. For years, it seemed like the classic lineup of Fleetwood Mac was officially dead and buried. After the 2018 firing, most fans had accepted that the bridge was burned beyond repair. But in March 2025, Mick Fleetwood and Lindsey Buckingham were seen together again. This wasn't a casual meetup or a quick call to clear up old business. Lindsey actually stepped into the studio to collaborate on Mick's upcoming solo album. It was the first time the two had made music together in 7 long years. The news broke when a Swedish producer named Carl Falk started sharing photos and updates on social media. Falk, who has worked with some of the biggest pop stars in the world, seemed almost starstruck by what he was witnessing. He described sitting in the room with these two legends as a slightly unreal moment. According to Falk, the energy in the room was not tense or awkward. Instead, he saw a genuine sense of happiness from Lindsey. After everything that had gone down, Lindsey was not there to argue about the past. He was there because he was excited for Mick to finally be making his own record. He even offered to play guitar and add his signature vocals to the tracks, showing that the bond between them was still very much alive. Seeing them together in those studio photos felt nostalgic. There they were, leaning over the mixing board, discussing arrangements just like they did 4 decades ago. It was a reminder that beneath all the lawsuits and public fights, their friendship had existed long before the fame. Mick had often spoken openly about wanting to mend this particular bond, sharing in interviews his hope that the band could one day become like a family again. Seeing Lindsey smile by Mick's drum kit felt like the first step toward turning that dream into reality. It was incredible to see Mick and Lindsay back together, but the biggest question still hung in the air. This reunion was a major step forward, yet it only solved part of the problem. While they were reconnecting and creating new music, everyone was waiting to see if this piece would reach the one person who might have the hardest time forgiving. Mick's solo project was becoming the safe space that could bring everyone back together, but the 2018 ultimatum was still a big part of their legacy. With Mick and Lindsay reconnecting, all eyes were on the final holdout, the queen of rock herself, Stevie Nicks. After the news of Mick and Lindsay's studio reunion settled, the big question remained. What about Stevie? For years, she was the one who seemed like she was completely done with all the drama. She had built a massive solo career and often told the press that she did not need the band anymore. But in July 2025, Stevie shared a post that looked like a random post, but she shared a photo with a caption that quoted a very specific old lyric, "And if you go forward." Almost immediately, Lindsay responded on his own page with the following line, "I'll meet you there." To a casual listener, these might seem like random poetic words. However, to the die-hard fans, this was the frozen love code. That song is the final track on the 1973 Buckingham Nicks album, which is the exact record that convinced Mick Fleetwood to hire them in the first place. It is the foundation of everything they built together. For these two to quote that specific song to each other after 7 years of silence was more than a coincidence. It was a public signal that the ice was finally melting and suggested the High Priestess and her former partner were finally ready to look past the messy breakup and at their new beginning. Mick stepping into the peacemaker role at 78 just says how much he values the band's legacy. He has been very open and calls for Stevie and Lindsay to come together and pal up in an attempt to preserve what they've built over the years. He has said that it would be a tragedy for their story to end in a courtroom or through angry press releases. Mick seems to be on a mission to make sure they find personal peace before it is too late. He knows that the clocks are ticking for everyone, and he wants the world to see that forgiveness is possible, even after 50 years of heartbreak. This strategy, his, seems to be working. Mick's push for a reconciliation is not about money anymore. He has already lost and made fortunes. This is about the soul of the band. He has been acting as the middleman, taking the heat and bridging the gap between two people who were once the most famous couple in rock and roll. By bringing them back to their roots with things like the Frozen Love lyrics, he is reminding them of why they fell in love with making music in the first place. He wants to turn the page from their past fights and write a final chapter that is about grace. People are starting to realize that all these small moments are building towards something much larger. The studio visits, the social media posts, and Mick's public pleas are not just random events. There's a real buzz building. The posts Mick shared and the lyrics Stevie shared. The excitement just grows. It feels like we're watching the pieces of a puzzle come together, all leading up to the biggest moment the band has ever had. The new beginnings. All the cryptic social media posts and studio reunions are pointing toward one destination. This is the 2026 Apple TV documentary directed by the legendary Frank Marshall. For decades, fans have had to piece together the story of Fleetwood Mac through old magazines and third-party biographies. But this project is different. This is the first time the band has officially opened up and sat down for what are being called unfiltered interviews. They are not holding back on the messy parts of their history anymore. Marshall is known for telling people's stories, and he seems to have captured the surviving members in a state of total honesty and vulnerability. The documentary sounds like it's going to be raw and honest, a glimpse to what their lives are like and on everything they've been through. Hearing Stevie open up about the toll of those years and Mick facing his struggles head-on without sugarcoating it will make it a life lesson. We are finally getting the full story behind these legends. Even Lindsey Buckingham is participating, providing his perspective on why he was fired in 2018 and how he feels about the band today. It is a rare chance to see how different people can remember the exact same events in completely different ways. What makes this film so special is the timing. Because it is being released in 2026, it also serves as a tribute to Christine McVie while also acting as a bridge to the future. The 2026 Apple documentary narrating the chaos. This Frank Marshall-directed film promises an unfiltered look into the lives behind the legend. Through candid interviews, the members open up like never before, sharing their personal truths about the affairs, addictions, and struggles that shaped their journey. These aren't just rehearsed stories, but the honest moments captured during the peak of their recent reconciliations, giving us a front-row seat to the breaking down of old walls. As the documentary gears up to drop, the band aren't just opening up about their past, they're stepping into what's next. Along with the documentary, they're dropping new music that feels like the final chapter of their story. They are setting the record straight and owning their story, showing the world that despite everything, they're still a family. Imperfect, complicated, but united. Everyone is excited because for the first time in almost 10 years, the entire surviving members of the band are coming together to share one story. We get to go on a nostalgic trip to their 70s and have a present-day look at how these rock legends are coming to terms with their legacy as they navigate their late 70s. They will be talking about the affairs, the betrayals, and the mountain of substance use with a level of clarity that only comes from being away from it for so long. Telling their story will make a lot of people realize that these people are human beings who just happen to make some of the greatest music ever recorded. As the world prepares for the premiere, the excitement is reaching a fever pitch. People are realizing that this documentary could be the final piece of the puzzle that explains why Mick has been so active in Maui lately. It is the commercial and emotional anchor for everything that is happening in 2026. This isn't just a look back, it's a message about what's next. As the documentary drops, the members aren't just sharing their stories, they're also releasing the music that will mark the end of their story. The Apple documentary is not the only thing to look forward to this year. It is a year of new beginnings, for the first time in what feels like forever, that the three main stars of the band are firing up their solo careers at the exact same time. Stevie Nicks is leading the charge with a project she has been calling the Ghost Record. She has described it as an autobiographical collection of songs telling real stories about the men she has known and the memories she has kept hidden for years. She is not pulling any punches this time, and fans are expecting some of her most vulnerable work since the early days of her career. It is a bold move for the Queen of Rock, yet again showing the world that her pen is just as sharp as it was in 1975. Not to be outdone, Lindsey Buckingham has been busy in his own studio, working on an album that he says represents the culmination of everything he has learned over the last 25 years. After surviving major heart surgery and his messy exit from the band, Lindsey sounds like a man with a renewed sense of purpose. He has been leaning back into his roots, focusing on the guitar work and unique production that made the Fleetwood Mac sound so iconic in the first place. And right in the center of all this activity is Mick Fleetwood himself. His upcoming solo album is shaping up to be a massive celebration of his journey, featuring guest spots from friends like Adam Granduciel and, of course, the legendary guitar work of Lindsey Buckingham. But the biggest rumor currently spreading around the music world is not about an album, it is about a stage. Rumors have been swirling about a potential residency at the Las Vegas Sphere, the most high-tech concert venue on the planet. For a band that has always been about massive visuals and immersive sound, the idea of a final goodbye inside a giant glowing orb seems almost too perfect. Imagine the famous cover of Rumors, or the swirling fabrics of Stevie's capes projected across a screen that wraps around the entire audience. While nothing has been officially signed yet, the fact that Mick, Stevie, and Lindsey are all on speaking terms has made this impossible residency look like a very real possibility for late 2026. Mick Fleetwood has spent his entire life trying to keep this group together, often at the expense of his own health and wealth. He has been the drummer, the manager, the peacemaker, and sometimes the villain. But now he seems to have finally achieved his greatest goal. He has moved past the multi-million-dollar debt, the secret affairs, and the legal battles to find a moment of genuine grace. His legacy will not just be the beats he played on the drums, but the fact that he was the man who finally healed the circle. He proved that even after 50 years of chaos, a family can still find its way back home. Mick Fleetwood's 78-year journey has taken him from the height of rock stardom to the brink of total collapse. Through addiction, bankruptcy, and betrayal, he never stopped drumming. Today, he has finally traded the chaos for a hard-won peace. If you could ask the band one question after watching the 2026 documentary, would it be about the music they made or the relationships they broke? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, click on the next video on your screen, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries.